The lake was a sheet of glass that night, its stillness so absolute it felt like the world held its breath. The moon hung low, a pale crescent casting silver threads across the water, weaving through the silhouettes of pine trees that lined the shore. It was late July, the air thick with the scent of moss and wood smoke, a damp warmth that clung to my skin. I'm Kate, 45, a high school English teacher from Boston, where life hums with the constant rhythm of traffic, ringing bells, and the chatter of students spilling through the halls. I'm used to noise, the scrape of desks, the clack of my ancient typewriter as I grade essays late into the night. But out here at a rented cottage by Lake Winnipesaukee, the quiet was a different beast. The place was a relic, its cedar walls weathered to a soft gray, the porch sagging under years of footsteps, the furniture a mismatched collection of thrift store finds, floral cushions clashing with plaid curtains, a wobbly coffee table scarred with coffee rings. My husband Tom and I had been bringing our son Daniel here since he was 4, his chubby hands clutching a plastic bucket as he toddled after minnows in the shallows. It was our escape, a week each summer to trade city grit for loons' calls and campfires. This year, though, the air felt heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. Daniel had just turned 18, graduated high school in June, his diploma still pristine in its frame on our mantel back home. He wasn't the same kid who'd once begged for esmores or raced me to the dock. He'd grown tall, 6 feet maybe more, his frame lean but broad, his dark hair perpetually falling into his eyes, his smiles rare and fleeting. Since spring he'd been a storm cloud, snapping at Tom over college applications, retreating to his room with his headphones blaring, barely speaking through the car ride up from Boston. I told myself it was normal, the weight of leaving childhood behind, and hoped the lake would work its magic, smooth the edges like it always had. That night, as the crickets sang and the fire in the hearth flickered low, I learned how wrong I was. That it started small, the way trouble often does. Tom had turned in early, worn out from a day on the water, his fishing rod propped against the porch railing, the tackle box still open beside it. He'd caught nothing worth keeping, just a few perch he'd tossed back, but the sun and the boat's gentle rocking had drained him. His snores drifted down from the loft bedroom, a steady rumble through the cottage's thin walls, a sound I'd grown to find comforting over our 20 years together. I was in the kitchen, elbow deep in dishwater, scrubbing the remnants of dinner. Trout Daniel had reeled in that afternoon, pan-fried with butter and a sprinkle of thyme from a jar I'd packed. He'd grinned when Tom slapped his back, a rare flash of pride as we ate, the fish flaky and warm on our plates. Now the sink was piled with greasy skillets and chipped ceramic, the window above it framing the lake's endless black, a void that swallowed the horizon. I was lost in the task, the sponge squeaking against metal, my mind drifting to lesson plans for September. Macbeth maybe, or The Great Gatsby, when I heard him shift in the living room. Daniel had been sprawled on the couch, long legs slung over the armrest, flipping through a paperback I'd tossed into the car. Steinbeck's East of Eden, its spine cracked from years of rereading. I'd glanced at him earlier, his silhouette softened by the glow of the floor lamp, and felt a tug of something bittersweet. My little boy, now a young man, teetering on the edge of whatever came next. "You okay, Dan?" I'd called, rinsing a plate, keeping my voice light to dodge the moodiness I'd come to expect. "Yeah," he'd muttered, not looking up, his tone sharp enough to cut. I let it slide, figuring he was just worn out from swimming, and turned back to the sink, the water swirling with soap bubbles. That's when it happened. The couch creaked, the book thudded softly onto the cushion, and his footsteps came, quiet but deliberate, crossing the worn rug to the kitchen. That I didn't turn at first, assuming he'd grab a soda from the fridge or head outside to the dock like he'd done the night before, staring at the stars with that restless look he'd worn all week. But he didn't pass by. He stopped, close, too close, his shadow falling over the counter, stretching across the dish rack. I turned, startled, water dripping from my hands onto the faded linoleum, the droplets catching the light. He stood there, filling the narrow space, his t-shirt wrinkled from the day, damp patches still clinging to his chest from an earlier swim. He smelled of lake water and sweat, earthy and sharp, his hair a mess of dark curls. "Dan," I said, a question more than a greeting, stepping back until the counter's edge dug into my lower back. He didn't answer, just looked at me, his eyes dark pools in the dim kitchen, the single bulb flickering overhead. His face was unreadable, but his body was tense, shoulders squared, hands loose at his sides, like he was holding himself in check. "What's wrong?" I asked, wiping my hands on a dish towel, the cotton rough against my damp skin, trying to keep my voice steady even as my pulse ticked up. He took a step closer, his sneakers silent on the floor, and the air thickened, pressing against my chest. "Nothing's wrong," he said, low, almost a whisper, but the words carried a weight that didn't match their meaning. Too careful, too loaded. I forced a laugh, shaky, brushing a strand of my graying auburn hair behind my ear. "Okay, then help me dry these," I said, nodding to the dripping rack, desperate to shift the moment back to normal. He didn't reach for the towel. Instead, he stepped forward again, closing the gap, and before I could process it, his hands were on my shoulders, firm, warm, pushing me back. My breath hitched as my back hit the wall beside the sink, the wood planks cool and splintery through my thin sweater, the impact jarring but not hard. "Daniel," I snapped, my voice rising, sharp with shock, but he didn't let go, not yet. He leaned in, his face inches from mine, his grip steady, his eyes boring into me with a raw, unplaceable intensity. Time stretched, a frozen second. My son pinning me there, the lake silent beyond the window, Tom's snores a distant hum. Then he released me, stepping back fast, his hands dropping, his chest rising and falling like he'd just surfaced from a dive. "Sorry," he mumbled, barely audible, and turned, shoving through the screen door into the night, the slam reverberating through the cottage. That I stood there, rooted, my hands trembling as they gripped the counter's edge, the dishwater cooling in the sink. My heart hammered, a wild thudding that drowned out the crickets, and I couldn't move, couldn't think. The wall's texture lingered on my back, a ghost of pressure, and I replayed it. His hands, the push, the way he'd loomed, the look in his eyes. It wasn't a fight, wasn't anger like the arguments we'd had over curfews or grades. It was something else, something that coiled in my gut, cold and wrong. I slid into a chair at the kitchen table, its legs wobbling on the uneven floor, and stared at the doorway, the screen still swaying faintly. Tom slept on, oblivious, and I envied that peace, that ignorance. I wanted to climb the stairs, shake him awake, spill it all, but what would I say? That Daniel had pinned me to the wall? That it felt off? The words tangled, refusing to form. I stayed there, the fire in the hearth dying to a smolder, the room growing chill, listening for him. I heard gravel crunch later, saw the faint glow of his phone's flashlight by the dock through the window, a silhouette against the lake, but he didn't come back inside. The night stretched endless, and I sat, wrapped in a throw blanket, until the sky paled with dawn. Morning came gray and heavy, the lake shrouded in mist. Daniel shuffled in as I brewed coffee, his hoodie zipped to his chin, hair mussed from sleep or lack of it. "Morning," he said, grabbing a mug from the cupboard, his voice flat but ordinary, like the night hadn't happened. I watched him, searching, his hands steady as he poured, his face blank as he stirred in sugar, too much, like always. No guilt, no flicker of shame, just Daniel, my son, acting normal. I couldn't match it. "Sleep okay?" I asked, my tone tighter than I meant, pouring my own cup. "Yeah," he said, shrugging, and stepped onto the porch with his coffee and phone, the door creaking shut. Tom came down soon after, rubbing his eyes, complaining about the mattress, and we ate breakfast, burnt toast, eggs scrambled with too much salt, in a quiet that pressed on me like a weight. I kept glancing at Daniel through the window, his profile sharp against the fog, scrolling his screen, sipping his drink. Had I dreamed it? Exaggerated it in the dark? But my shoulders ached faintly, the memory of his grip too real, the wall's roughness etched into me. We went through the day like nothing. Tom fishing off the dock, Daniel swimming lazy laps, me on a lawn chair with a book I couldn't read, the pages blurring as my mind churned. He'd laugh at Tom's bad jokes, toss his wet towel on the railing, ask for sunscreen with that half smirk I knew so well, and I'd hand it over, my fingers brushing the bottle, not him, my body tense, waiting for what? It didn't come, not then, but the shadow stayed. Daniel wasn't always like this. He'd been a soft kid, quiet, introspective, the kind who'd sit cross-legged on this very dock with a notebook, sketching ducks or boats while Tom taught him to cast a line. He'd loved stories, curled up with me on rainy afternoons in our Boston row house, my voice weaving through The Lion, The Witch in the Wardrobe or The Hobbit, his head on my shoulder, eyes bright. Tom and I had built a life there. He a mechanic with oil-stained hands, me teaching ninth graders to parse Shakespeare. Steady, unglamorous, but ours. Daniel thrived early, aced spelling bees, struggled with algebra, made friends who'd pile into our basement for video games. But things shifted when Tom got sick. Daniel was 14, all elbows and knees when the diagnosis came. Lung cancer stage 3, a shadow on the x-ray that stole our breath. Tom fought it, chemo stripping him to bones and willpower, and won, but the victory left scars. His energy sapped, our savings gutted, the house thick with tension. Daniel pulled away, his chatter fading, his friends drifting off. By senior year he was a ghost, headphones on, door shut, snapping at us over nothing. Dinner too late, college talk too soon. Graduation was a milestone we clung to, his cap tassel swinging as he crossed the stage, but it didn't heal him. He deferred college, said he needed time, and we let him, hoping this trip would pull him back. I'd seen the cracks all week, his long stares at the water, his flinch when Tom touched him, but I hadn't seen this coming. The trip dragged after that night. I kept busy, cooking elaborate breakfasts of pancakes and bacon, scrubbing the cottage's grimy corners, folding laundry with precision, anything to avoid tight spaces where Daniel might linger. He didn't try it again, not like that, but I'd catch him watching, his eyes on me as I diced onions, as I carried towels to the porch, silent, intense, too long. Tom missed it, chattering about boat motors or the Red Sox, his fishing hat tipped back, oblivious to the undercurrent. I wanted to tell him, spill it over coffee one morning, but how? Our son pinned me to the wall, and it wasn't a fight? It sounded absurd, unprovable, and I swallowed it, the secret festering. The last night I found Daniel by the fire pit, the flames crackling as he prodded them with a stick, sparks drifting into the dark. "Dan," I said, keeping the pit between us, my voice soft. "We good?" He looked up, firelight dancing on his face, shadows deepening his eyes. "Yeah," he said, quick, dismissive, and jabbed the stick harder. I didn't press, didn't know how. We packed the next day, the car ride home silent, but for Tom's humming, Boston's skyline a gray promise ahead. I thought it might end there, fade into the lake's depths. Back in the city it didn't. Daniel moved to the basement. His idea said he wanted privacy, and I'd hear him below, strumming his guitar, the notes a dull thud through the floorboards. I'd jump at every creak, every stair groan, locking my bedroom door each night. The bolts click, a new ritual I despised but needed. Tom noticed my nerves, asked if work was piling up. New semester, new kids, and I nodded, dodging his eyes. Daniel got a job at a hardware store, lugging paint cans, started muttering about community college, seemed to stabilize. But I couldn't shake it. The press of his hands, the walls bite. One evening, a note slipped under my door, his scrawl jagged, "Sorry about the lake. Didn't mean to scare you." I held it, relief clashing with unease, and hid it in a drawer, unsure what to say. I started seeing Mrs. Carter, the school counselor, her office a haven of worn books and herbal tea. "He pinned me," I told her weeks in, my voice trembling. Not to hurt, but it was wrong. She leaned forward, gray curls framing her face. "What did it mean to you, Kate?" "That he wasn't my Daniel," I said. "He was something else." Months later the truth cracked open. Daniel came home late, boots muddy, and found me in the kitchen, red pen bleeding over essays. "Mom," he said, lingering in the doorway, "can we talk?" I set the pen down, heart thudding, and nodded. He sat, hands twisting, and it poured out. Tom's cancer breaking him, graduation a cage, the lake a boiling point. "I was so mad," he said, voice rough. "At Dad for almost dying, at you for being fine, at me for nothing working. That night. I wanted you to see me, really see me. It came out all wrong." I listened, seeing the boy lost in the man, his pain a knot he'd lashed out with. "You terrified me," I said. "I didn't know you anymore." "I didn't either," he admitted, eyes down. "I'm sorry." We sat, the house still, and I saw it, not intent but a kid drowning, reaching wrong. He started therapy, moved to a friend's, and we rebuilt. Coffee chats, quiet nods. The lake lingered, a memory I didn't revisit, but the door unlocked and we moved forward, step by step. The weeks after Daniel's confession felt like walking on a frozen lake. Every step careful, testing the ice, waiting for a crack. He'd moved out that next month, crashing with a high school buddy, Josh, in a cramped apartment near the hardware store where he worked. It was a third-floor walk-up in Somerville, the kind with peeling paint and a fire escape that rattled in the wind, but he texted me a photo the day he settled in. A lumpy futon, a milk crate for a table, his guitar propped in the corner. "Home sweet home," he wrote, and I could almost hear the wry edge in his voice. I replied with a thumbs up, my fingers hesitating over something more, then sent a care package a week later. Granola bars, a fleece blanket, a cheap coffee mug with Boston Strong scrawled on it. "Thanks, Mom," he texted back, and that was our rhythm now. Small gestures, short messages, a bridge rebuilding plank by plank. Back in our row house, the basement sat empty, his old space a hollow echo. No guitar riff seeping up, no sneakers thumping the stairs. I'd walk past the door sometimes, half expecting to hear him, and catch myself holding my breath. Tom noticed the shift too. Asked why I was so quiet, if the new semester was wearing me down. "Just adjusting," I said, stirring soup on the stove, the steam curling between us. He nodded, didn't push, and I let the half-truth settle, still guarding that night at the lake like a bruise I couldn't show. Daniel started therapy around then, a counselor his boss recommended, Dr. Patel, a wiry man with a calm voice and a knack for cutting through bullshit, or so Daniel said. He'd go twice a week after his shifts, lugging paint cans all day, then sitting in a beige office, unraveling the mess inside him. He didn't tell me much at first, just "it's fine," or "weird but okay." But one night he called, his voice crackling through the line. "Talked about Dad today," he said, the hardware store's hum faint behind him. "How he got sick. How I thought we'd lose him." I sat on the couch, clutching a throw pillow, the living room dim save for a lamp's glow. "That was hard for you," I said, soft, remembering those years. Tom bald and gaunt, Daniel retreating to his room, me juggling hospital runs and lesson plans. "Yeah," he said, a pause stretching long. "Made me mad. At him, at you, at everything. Still does, I guess." I nodded, though he couldn't see. "I felt it too, Dan. But we got through." "Did we?" he asked, sharp, then softened. "Sorry. Just figuring it out." "That's why you're there," I said. "Keep going." He hummed, a sound like agreement, and hung up, leaving me with the pillow pressed to my chest, Tom's snores drifting from upstairs. That we started meeting up after that. Once a week, then twice, coffee at a diner near his place, the kind with sticky tables and waitresses who called you hon. He'd show up in his work apron sometimes, paint flecks on his jeans, and we'd talk, small stuff at first. His job, my students, the Sox's losing streak. Then deeper, how therapy was peeling back layers, how he'd hated the pressure of college, how the lake had been a breaking point. "I didn't mean it like that," he said one rainy afternoon, stirring cream into his coffee, the spoon clinking. "Penny, you wasn't, I don't know. I was messed up." I sipped my tea, the mug warm against my palms, and met his eyes, still dark but clearer now. "It scared me, Dan," I said, steady. "I didn't know what you wanted." He looked down, jaw tight. "I didn't either. Just wanted you to see me, I think. Came out wrong." I nodded, the memory sharp. The wall, his hands, the lake's silence. "It's behind us," I said, meaning it or trying to. "But you've got to keep working on you." "I am," he said, a flicker of a smile. "Promise." Months passed and he grew steadier. Moved from Josh's to a studio in Alston. A shoebox with a hot plate and a view of a dumpster, but his. He sent me a photo of a thrift store lamp he'd fixed, proud, and I mailed him a cookbook. Basic recipes, nothing fancy. He got a second job, bussing tables, started jamming with coworkers, not a band yet but a spark. We'd meet for burgers or walks by the Charles, talking about his riffs, my latest class, the past easing into something we could carry. The lake faded, a scar we didn't pick at, and I stopped locking my door, the bolt gathering dust. One night he came by the house, first time in a year, boots off, hair damp from rain. "Made you something," he said, handing me a CD, his handwriting on the label. "For Mom." I played it later, alone, guitar notes soft and raw, a song about water and shadows. The ice held and we kept walking, finding solid ground.